Good afternoon, everybody. We still have people clicking in. This is Joe Tai from Values Coach. We will be beginning in 1 minute. Thank you very much for coming to join us on this webinar that will help you set and achieve big dreams during 2013. Before we get started, let me point out that if I do not cover something that you would like to see covered today, you are welcome to give me, send me an email. That's really the best way to reach me because I'm on the road so often. Simply joe@joetai.com, and I typically respond to emails within 24 hours. Also, we're trying a new webinar service company, and I believe this will work. If you have a question, you can raise your hand and type it in. And Michelle in our office is also on the webinar. And if it's an immediate question or you're having a problem, she will be able to help you with that. Otherwise, it will be something that we will we'll deal with later. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that we have 1 hour together. And in 1 hour, I can share with you some great ideas. I can hopefully inspire you to use those ideas. I can challenge you to think in new ways. I cannot create a complete set of goals and dreams for you for 2013. But that is why we've given you the ebook of Your Dreams Are Too Small. That is why we've given you the entire workbook that I use for my Grand Canyon workshop on Spark a Dream. That's why we've given you the 360-day journal. So that today I hopefully and I expect to challenge you to do the homework, which is in the ebook and the workbook and the daily journal, to challenge you to think bigger and dream bigger and work harder to achieve those dreams. One last thing on the homework. I've had several requests from people who saw the PDF of the 360-day journal and would like to have it as a Word document so they could keep the journal on their computer. We can do that. We're working on it. We have to do some cleanup. I did it in Publisher originally, and we're transferring it into a Word document. We will send that out later today. So here is what I expect to accomplish today. These 5 goals, and all in 60 minutes. One, I want to tell you about the concept of memories of the future and describe and convince you, frankly, that they can be more real and more powerful than your memories of the past. And we all know how faulty our memory can be. I want to convince you that your future memory can actually be more accurate. Second, I want to help you think about and articulate your goal, whether it's one big goal for next year or a couple that you want to accomplish, and articulate it in a way that it inspires you and the people who need to help you achieve that goal work with you to make it happen. 3, I really want to focus on some practical strategies for creating those memories of the future and confronting and overcoming that inevitable resistance that's going to come your way, probably beginning before the next hour when the little voice in the back of your head says, oh, that's too big a dream. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, who do you think you are? Goal number 4, to help you deal with that resistance, I want to share with you the pyramid of self-belief and some other things that you can do that will help you create a stronger sense of belief in your dreams. One of the best-selling books written on goal setting, written more than 30 years ago, simply called The Power of Belief. When you believe something sufficiently, you become a force of nature. And finally, I want to inspire you to think big. I want to inspire you to have the courage to take the risks, to be determined to overcome the barriers that get in your way so that you can achieve your dreams and your goals. And I suppose goal number 6, I should add, would be to inspire you to do the homework. And our program today is in 5 parts. And part number 1 is this, thinking about the destination and thinking about your destiny. We teach a course called the 12 Core Action Values, and I know many of the people on the call today have been involved in that course one way or another. And core action value number 1 is authenticity. And I recently read a book about integrity, core action value number 2, but it really relates back to authenticity. And the title of the book, quoting somebody who was involved in the anti-Nazi resistance during World War II, he said to his fellows, if you know who you are, then you will know what to do. And that's why it's so important that your dreams, that your goals be authentic. If you know who you are, you will establish more authentic goals and you will know how to achieve those goals. But then core action value number 7 is purpose. And I love what Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams Real Estate, he tells his realtors, you have to have a big why, and it has to be bigger than making a lot of money or contributing to your retirement fund. You have to have a goal, a cause that's bigger than just you. And if you have those two things, if you're clear about who you are and you're clear about what you want, it makes your ability to achieve your goals much bigger. But I want to start with a true story. A couple of years ago, I wrote this book, All Hands on Deck, about building a culture of ownership. And for a while, it was in airport bookstores. And this guy in the picture bought one. Detlev von Platen is CEO of the Porsche Car Company of North America. He bought the book. He liked it. He called our office up, got me on the phone. He said, hey, I liked your book. I would love to have you come out to Atlanta and spend a day with our leadership team. I said, well, I'd love to do that. So we talked about the program. We talked about the agenda. We talked about scheduling. Finally, he says, okay, we've got it all worked out. What's it going to cost? And I said, here at Values Coach, we are big fans of barter. So I'll make you a deal. I will give you a full day of my time, all expenses covered, all the books you can read, all the resources. You give me a Porsche 911 Carrera GT, and we'll call it a wash. Now, there are two important lessons in this. Key lessons about achieving your dreams. Lesson number 1, you got to know what you want. If what I had wanted was a Subaru Outback, he'd have been the wrong guy to talk to. You have to know what you want before you can know what you have to do and who you have to ask for help. And the second thing is you've got to be willing to ask. If it's a big enough dream, you can't do it yourself. I had to be willing to ask him to make this trade of my time for one of his cars. And as the footnote says, he's got a whole lot of cars. I doubt he'd miss giving just one of them to me. So I did. I asked. He said yes. Now, I am now the proud owner of a Porsche 911 Carrera GT with a special racing package that you really cannot get off the showroom floor. I see it every morning sitting on my bookshelf. There it is. Now, this brings me to another lesson. Gilda Radner said, the late Gilda Radner said, when I was young, I always said I want to grow up and be somebody. Now I know I should have been more specific. And lesson number 3, make sure that you're asking for the right thing. And I think there are 2 corollaries to that. One is don't chase what you don't really want. The average American today spends 4.5 hours, according to A.C. Nielsen, 4.5 hours a day with the television on. Nobody on their deathbed ever said, I wish I had watched more TV. What they do say, I wish I had spent more time with friends and family, relationships. I wish I would have written the book, traveled the world, started the business, experiences. I wish I would have taken better care of my health, and I wish I would have done a better job of managing my money. Those are the 4 big end-of-life regrets people have. But they end up being regrets because we haven't chased the things that we want. We've spent too much time chasing things we don't really want or wanting things we can't have. I will never be an NFL quarterback. And for me to spend hours a day out in the backyard practicing throwing a football would be a pretty substantial waste of time. So those are the 3 lessons. Know what you want, be willing to ask for the help, but make sure that your goal is authentic so that you can do the right things and ask the right questions. So let's get to part 2 of the webinar, which is creating memories of the future. And I absolutely do believe that you can remember the future. I love what Lewis Carroll, the writer, said. It really is a poor sort of memory that only works backward. If all you can remember is what happened in the past and you can't remember what happened in the future, and it is a skill that can be cultivated. I absolutely believe that you can remember the future more clearly and more accurately than you can remember the past. Now, I was talking one time with a group of nurses, and I said this. I was talking about memories of the future, and I said, you can remember the future more clearly and more accurately than you can remember the past. And there was a nurse sitting there in the back row, and she raised her hand. She said, Mr. Ty, I work in the psych unit. And she actually did look quite a bit like this. She said, I work in the psych unit. We have a lot of people like you up there. And so I had to explain to her that I'm not talking about being delusional. I'm not talking about wishful thinking. I'm talking about positive thinking. And I said, before I get into that distinction, though, let me prove to you that you can remember the future more clearly and more accurately than you can remember the past. So I asked everybody in the audience to remember something that had actually happened in their past, their second birthday. The candles, the singing of the song, the presents, the gifts, the guests, and of course nobody could. That was funny, I said, because it really did happen for everybody in this room, but the memory is gone. Okay, now I asked, how many of you can create a mental picture of where you are going to be this time tomorrow? What you're doing, who you're with, where you are, and almost every hand went up. They could all remember where they're going to be this time tomorrow, even though technically it had not happened yet. And so I pointed out the reason that we can remember, visualize where we're going to be this time tomorrow, going to be a lot like this time yesterday or this day last week. One of the secrets of being successful is the ability to remember a tomorrow or a next week, next month, next year that is somehow different than the past. That is the difference between wishful thinking and positive thinking. It is creating a mental image of you, of your goal, of your situation, of your dream of today as your reality tomorrow. The difference between wishful thinking and positive thinking is this. Wishful thinking is hoping for something and waiting for someone else to make it happen for you. It is waiting to win the lottery. And I find this statistic absolutely appalling. You know, buying lottery tickets is really victim thinking. It's hoping that somebody else will give you money that you don't have to earn, that you don't really deserve, to bail you out of the problems that you don't think you can solve because you don't have the gumption to go out and earn the money and do the work yourself. And it's appalling how many people already have big plans for what they will do if somebody gives them money that they don't have to work to earn it, and if they win the lottery. And that is the wishful thinking that afflicts so many people in this country. Positive thinking, on the other hand, is expecting something and then doing the work to make it happen. For some time, we worked with a hospital in lovely Page, Arizona. And when you drive north from Cameron into Page, on your left-hand side, you look over and you see these magnificent cliffs. And it's spectacular. And one day I was driving up to Page. I looked off to the left, and there were a bunch of big Caterpillar tractors gouging a hole into the earth right in front of this spectacular view. And so when I got to the hospital, I was talking to people, and I asked, what are they doing out there? What's that big hole going to be? And somebody said, well, that's going to be the home of the new Super Walmart. Now, for better or worse, or for better and worse, what are the chances that once they started digging the hole, they'd give up and stop building that Super Walmart? And they are precisely zero. And of course, this is it. This is the new Super Walmart in Page, Arizona. It's a reality now, but before it became a reality on the ground, it was a reality in the mind of somebody else. The Walmart in Page was a literal memory of the future for somebody at the Walmart Corporation before they ever turned over the first shovel of dirt. There was somebody sitting at one of those plain metal desks they have in all of their offices, and on his desk he had a plan, a schedule a blueprint, and a budget. And it was a memory of the future. I mean, he was absolutely 100% certain that once he signed the final piece of paper, the final contract, that Super Walmart was going to become a reality. And I think that is a beautiful metaphor for creating a memory of the future. When you have your dream, your vision, your goal so clearly defined that you have a plan, a schedule, a budget, a blueprint, whatever it is, it becomes a memory of the future. Now, every year I do a workshop at Grand Canyon. It's a 3-day workshop called Spark a Dream. And if you signed up for this webinar, one of the handouts that you got is the workbook that I give people at that workshop. And at the workshop, we give everybody a t-shirt. And on the back it says this: define your future by your dreams and not by your memories. How many people are held back? They don't progress in life. They don't pursue their dreams because they're being held back by painful memories of the past. By your hopes and not by your fears. How many people are trapped in jobs they hate, trapped in terrible relationships, trapped in debt because they don't have the courage to change their behavior? And so that's what's on the back of the t-shirt. And then on the front, I ask people to draw a picture of their dream and wear that dream next to their heart. And I have heard people, just that simple thing of articulating their dream in a way that that is pictorial, a way that they can really see it, in a way that inspires them, has created the inspiration, the direction, the drive to pursue it. And one of my favorite stories, one guy drew a picture on the front of his t-shirt of a farm, and it had the red barn, the green John Deere tractor, a little dog running through a cornfield. And what he said is that this is the family farm. He said, this farm has been in our family for more than 100 years, but I'm afraid we're going to lose it. He said, my dad has passed away. The brothers don't want to be in the farm business anymore, and I can't afford to keep it all up myself. I'm afraid we're going to lose the farm. And so I told him, every day for the next year, you wear this t-shirt underneath whatever costume you happen to wear to your real job. Wash it every now and then. But every time you put it on in the morning, you say to yourself 5 times, the family farm stays in the family. And you say it like you really mean it. The family farm stays in the family. That's just wishful thinking if you don't do anything else, isn't it? So to turn that into positive thinking, I said every single day before you go to bed, you do at least 2 things, no matter how small, you do at least 2 things that are intended to keep that family farm in the family. So, for example, you call the bank and say, hey, I've got a little bit more money saved up. Should we talk again about the mortgage I want to do? Or you call another bank. Or you call a neighbor and offer to sell them 10 acres or 15 acres as a way of bringing in some cash and reducing how much you have to borrow. You talk to somebody else about investing in the business of your farm. You take a $5 bill and put it in a coffee can that says farm mortgage, instead of going to some coffee shop and blowing it on a latte. Two of those things each and every day. I got a call from this young man about a year later. He was clearly emotional. He was clearly on cloud 9, and he told me that he had just gotten back from the bank where he had signed the papers, and he said the family farm stays in the family. Now, he had to make some real sacrifices. He had to sell his new car and buy, drive an old pickup truck. He did have to sell off some acreage in order to bring down the cost, but the family farm stayed in the family, and the word he used was miracle. Now, in my own family, this is my wife, Sally. Sally and I, almost 20 years ago, we bought 12 acres in rural Iowa, and it had a small farmhouse on it, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. And we had 2 teenage kids. So we said, next year we'll build a new house out on the corner of our property here. That was 20 years ago. Yesterday, we moved into that house. It took a whole lot longer than what we wanted, but I'm absolutely convinced, I know for a fact, that the things that I'm teaching you today, creating memories of the future, drawing pictures of your dreams on t-shirts as one example, like the way Sally has drawn a picture of our dream house. That's the 2 of us in our dotage years sitting on the front porch. These things really work, and they can help you achieve your dreams. And I'll tell you why they work. Because when you do this, when you start creating a memory of the future, you create cognitive dissonance, but you do it in a healthy way. Cognitive dissonance is a form of mental illness. It is trying to hold two incompatible beliefs at the same time. That's mental illness. If you use it consciously and constructively, though, it can galvanize you and motivate you toward achieving your goals and dreams. And let's say, for example, that you live in the upper left-hand side trailer park. You know, like Jeff Foxworthy's definition of a redneck, your house has wheels and your car doesn't. But you think you ought to live, you deserve to live, you would love to live in a beautiful log home like this on the lower right with your truck out front. If you, instead of, at that point you have cognitive dissonance, and one of two things is going to happen. Either your dream, your wish becomes just that, if I won the lottery, a fantasy, and you start more and more feeling like a victim, more and more feeling helpless, or it becomes so painful, this gap between where you are now and where you want to be, that you start doing everything that you have to do. You start waking up in the middle of the night with ideas. You start disciplining your spending and your saving. Maybe you turn off the TV at night and get a second job to bring in a little more cash. You have to do something to deal with that emotional pain of cognitive dissonance, either by giving into it and becoming a victim, or by doing the work to get out of it, by working your way toward your new dream. And that is the power of imagination when you actually act upon it. We are given this incredible gift to be able to see things that are not really there. The way somebody saw a super Walmart on the side of the road leading into Page, when what everybody else saw was this beautiful vista out to the cliffs. So let's look a little bit more at imagination. Unfortunately, most of us take this incredible, beautiful gift of being able to see things that aren't there, and we morph it, we abuse it, and we do that in two ways. One is worry. That's all worry is, isn't it? It is imagining something that you don't want to have happen. Now, a little bit of worry can be a good thing if it causes you to take action to prevent that which you fear. But once it becomes toxic, once it kills imagination, then it paralyzes your ability to dream. And the second way we abuse it is fantasy. Fantasy is dreaming of a future that you have no intention whatsoever of working to create. And that's another way that a lot of people abuse their imagination. Now, a little bit of fantasy can be a good thing. You know, you fantasize this beautiful house, and then you start realizing, well, you know, we could probably, maybe not the big castle, but we could probably get ourselves going in that way. A little bit of fantasy is a good thing. A little bit of worry is a good thing. But if you overdo it, they can both be toxic to imagination. I heard this story. It's a great metaphor. Little kindergarten kid sitting there in class, and the assignment is to draw a picture of a tree. And little Katie is there drawing away on her pad, and the teacher comes over and looks down and sees this picture, and she says, well, Katie, I've never seen a purple tree. And Katie looks up and says, gee, that's too bad. Where do we lose the ability to see purple trees? You know, any 2 or 3-year-old kid, they have these wild, vivid, extraordinary imaginations. And then they run into parents and teachers and schoolyard bullies and bosses and coworkers who tell them, get real, that's not possible, who squash their imagination. And part of the challenge is building that ability. It's like any other muscle. Imagination gets stronger when you use it, and if you don't use it, or if you abuse it with worry and you abuse it with fantasy, it atrophies. And spend a little bit of time every day thinking about, in very clear, specific, precise terms, what you want to have in your future life. So you want to have, you live in the trailer park, and you'd really love to live in a log home. Visualize it. Can you actually feel the wood floor under your feet? Can you hear the crackling of the fireplace? Do you want this to be on 1 acre out in the country? Do you want it to be on 12 acres out in the middle of the wilderness? The more clear you are, the more you engage every one of your senses in it. And if you're in a small group, family, group of coworkers at work, the more it becomes a collective vision, the more all of you are using your imagination to flesh out the details, the more real the dream becomes and the more certain it is to be fulfilled. Now, the absolute enemy of imagination, worse than fantasy, worse than a little bit of worry, is anxiety. And if you were on the Never Fear, Never Quit webinar last month, I did speak about this, so I'm going to do a quick recap, because a high level of anxiety is not just detrimental, it's lethal to imagination. If you are looking through those glasses that say doom, it doesn't matter what's going on in the rest of the world. You do not see the world as it is. You see it as you are. If you're in a high state of anxiety, it's really hard for you to see the positive. It's really hard for you to believe in your own dreams, to believe in yourself. Why? Because when you're in a high state of anxiety, three bad things happen. One, your memory gets distorted. When you have a real high sense of anxiety, everything you've done in the past gets warped. Your failures, the times you've fallen on your face, those things seem huge and certain to happen again, and your successes seem like luck, or somebody else did it for you, or it'll never happen again, or it wasn't really that big a deal. The bad thing number two is what you see when you look around you in the world gets warped out of proportion. The dangers you're facing, and you're seeing this a lot now with the economy. I mean, what do you focus on? The fact that we have 7% unemployment, or that we have 93% employment? What do you focus on? How hard it is to find a job, or how easy it is today to start a business? When you have a high level of anxiety, it's much easier to focus on the negatives. Your mind is naturally going to gravitate toward those negatives. And as a result of those two, when you're in a state of high anxiety, your future vision gets distorted. It's much harder for you to see the bright, shiny outcome. It's much harder for you to believe that dream is going to become real. It seems so impossible when you're in that black cloud of anxiety. And so you have to learn how to deal with anxiety in order to liberate your imagination to create those beautiful dreams. And one of the tools that psychologists use is called the performance anxiety curve. And what this shows is that up to a certain point, a little bit of anxiety is a good thing. If you have test anxiety, so-called, and it gets you to leave the bar and go to the library, that's a really good thing. If you look at your retirement account and say, oh my goodness, I could never retire on this, that causes anxiety. If it causes you to turn off the TV and start a little business or get a second job, that's a good thing. But once you crest over the top of that curve and head to the right, you become increasingly unable to cope, unable to dream, unable to take risks. You sit there with the test in front of you and you know the answer, but you're in brain freeze. And that is why it is so important for you to make sure that you stay on the left side of that curve in order to create memories of the future. So let's talk about the 6 A's of memory of the future. And I actually probably would add a 7th A, and I'll mention that when we get to it. But the first, and by the way, I didn't go through the dictionary and just look up words that begin with A to try to figure this out. It happened pretty coincidentally, but quite conveniently. And the first A is you have to aspire. You gotta want it. It's just wishful thinking if you don't really want it, if you don't have that so-called fire in the gut. Without ambition, we'd all still be hunting and gathering, and frankly, a lot of people are sort of in that mode yet. You have to have this inner desire, and the stronger that desire is, the less likely it is that you're going to be knocked flat by whatever the world throws at you. Randy Pausch, the late Randy Pausch, wrote the book, The Last Lecture. And it's a beautiful book written by a man dying of cancer. about how to live. And in the book he said, brick walls are not there to stop you. They are there to make you prove how much you want something. And that's the question of how bad do you want it? How bad do you want your workplace to be one of the best? How bad do you want to build that new house? How bad do you want to get that PhD, write the book, travel the world, whatever? Do you really and truly aspire to it? The second A is adumbrate. That means to create a vague outline. Like if you look up at the moon on a cloudy night and there's a shadow around it, the penumbra. To adumbrate means to create a vague image, a vague outline. And that's where you start. And you go back and forth visualizing it, working on the dream, and gradually the details begin to evolve. And your dream becomes more and more a memory of the future. But the third thing you need to do, excuse me, is to be able to articulate that dream in a way that others can see it. If your dream is a new house, well, you need to have a rendering so that you know what the outside is going to look like. You need to have a blueprint so that you know where everything goes. You need to be able to articulate it in a contract documents so the builder knows where to put everything and what to order. You need to articulate it in financial terms so that your banker knows whether or not and how to give you a loan. You know, Martin Luther King knew the power of articulating his dream, the famous dream. And one of the most famous speeches of all time, he spoke about, I have a dream. And he articulated that dream in such a way that anybody could understand it. He said, I have a dream that my child and your child can play together in harmony without caring about the color of their skin. And what parent couldn't resonate with that dream? But he also articulated the dream in a highly academic and theoretical and theological way in his letter from the Birmingham jail, a 12-page letter with footnotes. The fourth A is you have to take action. And without action, it's just wishful thinking. Action is the hacksaw that hacks through the prison bars of fear. And as with the guy with the 5 times a day, the affirmation, and 2 times a day, the action of doing something to keep the family farm in the family, the accumulation of a lot of little actions, finally, it's like the diamond cutter who gently taps on a gem 10,000 times, and it's the 10,000th little tap that causes a piece to fracture off, and that's how they turn a rough diamond into a beautiful gemstone. And it's the same thing with crafting your dream. Now, the A that I probably would add if I were doing this over again is affirmation, because we dream in pictures but we worry in words. And there is more and more evidence that the power, you know, when people have been talking about self-talk for thousands of years, you know, the Bible says you become what you think about. You become what you talk to yourself about. And the power of verbal positive affirmations. The family farm stays in the family is one of them. I am capable of achieving my goals. It will help you turn that dream into your future reality. But as I said in the example of the Porsche, you've got to be willing to ask. Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen wrote this book, The Aladdin Factor, and they say it's asking the right question of the right person at the right time. You know, the person who wants to build a new house and the bank says no, interest rates drop 2 or 3 percentage points, and maybe the bank will say yes, or they've saved up a little more money, or maybe they have to go to a different bank. It's not ask and you shall receive, it's ask and keep asking until you get the answer you want to hear. And finally, you've got to be able to adapt. Helmut von Moltke wrote a book on the art of war, and he said, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And you know what? The world changes. You change. Your dreams and your goals are going to change. And very often, adapting does not mean scaling down your dream. Sometimes it means scaling up. The 2 guys who started Google in their dorm room at Stanford, they never, when they started, could have anticipated having one of the world's most influential corporations a little more than 10 years later. They started And as they kept working on it, their dream got bigger. They adapted upward. Sometimes, like the guy who had to sell off some of the acres on the farm, you do have to adapt downwards. So part 3, let's talk about actually setting and achieving big goals. And the most important thing I'm trying to get across here is to challenge you to do that, because when you have a big goal as opposed to a timid little goal, it gives you what I think of as 5 power tools. And the first is, it is a magnifying glass. When you have a big goal, you focus your time, your energy, your money on the achievement of that goal. At one of my Never Fear, Never Quit conferences many years ago, we had Candace Leitner there. Her daughter had been run over and killed by a drunk driver, and to create meaning in a tragedy where there was no meaning, to create a legacy for her daughter, she started Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And every minute, every dollar, every ounce of energy she had was focused on getting the laws changed to raise the drinking age and to make drunk driving the crime it should be and not what it was back then, a slap on the wrist. Her big goal was a magnifying glass. It's a magnet. When you have a big goal, you inspire the people around you. When Millard and Linda Fuller started Habitat for Humanity, their goal was no more shacks anywhere in the world, not just Americus, Georgia, where they lived. They took on the entire world. And it was the magnitude, the grandeur of that goal that attracted people like former President Jimmy Carter, that attracted large contributions, that attracted tens of thousands of people to pick up hammers and go do work that they wouldn't have done, that they would have needed to be paid for if they were doing it on a construction job, but they volunteered their time, brought their own tools. It was the grandeur of that big dream. It's a telescope that allows you to see into the future. If your dream is the new house, and where you're living now is the little trailer park, you keep your focus on that dream, on where you want to be, and it helps you see past the obstacles, the detours, the compromises you may have to make on the way, because you never let go of that dream. My favorite metaphor, it is a spark plug. When you have a big dream, it gets you out of bed in the morning. It gets you to take the actions you have to take, even though you're afraid to take them. Wednesday's promise of the Self-Empowerment Pledge. It is a catalyst to action, and this may be the most important one. We all have bad days. We all have days when it's raining. We all have days when we lose our faith in ourselves, when the dream seems almost impossible. But when you latch onto that big goal, it's a flywheel that helps you maintain your momentum. And if you have these power tools, you're not going to settle for anemic dreams and goals. You're not going to cheat yourself and the rest of us by not pursuing your dreams, by not giving us your very best. Winston Churchill used to ask his generals, or tell his generals, act as if you could not fail. And I love this. Robert Schuller, among others, has riffed on that theme. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Stop being afraid of the things that might go wrong. You know, the economy might go bad, whatever. I might lose my job. Focus on what could go right. If I start a business, I could end up being more successful than my wildest dreams today. Now, once you have that big goal, it is, by the way, the workbook for the Spark a Dream will do a lot to help you set your goals for next year. That's your homework. But you will inevitably run into inner barriers, your own negative self-talk, your own assumptions about yourself, your own self-image, and, of course, outer barriers. I love this bumper sticker. I used to have superhuman powers, but my therapist took them all away. And that's what the world does to us. It takes away that incredible imagination, that power of belief that we're born with, and we have to re-spark it. And one of the tools that we use in our course on the 12 Core Action Values is the pyramid of self-belief, because self-belief really occurs at these 4 levels. And it starts with self-concept. What do you see when you look around? Do you see a world of abundance and opportunity, or scarcity and risk? Pick up any newspaper and you'll see both. What do you focus on? Do you focus on the opportunities to make a difference, the opportunities to build something amazing, or do you focus on all the bad things that are happening in the world? And the media is focused on trying to get you to do the latter. I call it the tragetainment. industry because they take the latest tragedy, turn it into news so they can sell advertising. This is a choice. You choose to focus on the positives. You create a positive set of assumptions about how the world works, about how other people work, about the support you're going to get. Self-image. What do you see when you look in the mirror? I think this is the most important block in this pyramid. If you look in the mirror and instead of seeing yourself as a winner, you see yourself as a victim or a loser, you'll never exceed your self-image. This is why almost everybody who wins, in quotes, wins the lottery, ends up bankrupt within a few years because their self-image is not consistent with themselves as a winner. I love this picture. How others see you doesn't matter. It's how you see yourself that means everything. And the good news is that is something you can improve. Do the things that we've talked about today, through dreaming bigger, through positive affirmation, through taking action, through asking for help. Those things help you build your self-image. Self-esteem. Do you like what you see when you look in the mirror? And by self-esteem, I do not mean arrogance, quite to the contrary. But people who have low self-esteem tend to make excuses. They'd probably just reject me, or I'd probably just fail. And they end up watching TV instead of starting the business or going back to school. And you have an obligation to yourself and to the people who love you and that you love and care for, and the people you work with, to work on having a higher level of self-esteem. That is essential for you to achieve your goals and dreams. And finally, self-confidence. Go back to the guy who drew a picture of a farm on his t-shirt. At first, when he was doing those 2 things a day, he truly, absolutely did not believe it was going to happen. He was convinced he was going to lose the farm. But he did it anyway. And every time he did something that helped him keep the family farm in the family, it built his self-confidence. And finally, he hit a tipping point. He hit a critical mass where he had done enough things. He was starting to get positive results back. He started having the confidence. He started believing that it could happen. You must challenge your own self-limiting beliefs and assumptions. One of the future webinars we're going to have is on the power of self-talk, for better and worse. You've got to not let yourself talk yourself out of achieving your dreams and goals. And you all have, I'm sure, the Self-Empowerment Pledge, one promise for each day of the week. The one that frankly is the hardest for me, but that if you can achieve it, is Tuesday's promise. Do not allow low self-esteem, self-limiting assumptions, or the negative attitudes and simply raining on the parade of other people to stop you. You proceed in spite of that stuff. Now, there's one thing that I really have to emphasize. Back in 1936, Dorothea Brande, in the middle of the Great Depression, wrote this book, one of the first modern self-help books, Wake Up and Live. And in this book, there is a chapter called The Will to Fail. And she says people fail not because they're doing things wrong. They fail because they're trying to do so many different things all at once that they never are able to concentrate on the 1 or 2 things that they have to do to achieve their goals and dreams. We're kind of like this guy with the shell game. We've got so many things going on that we don't focus on the one thing that really matters, but we always have an excuse. Oh, yeah, well, I didn't do that because I was too busy to do this. I didn't do that because I was too busy to do this. It's like the shell's whipping around. I have this sign in my office. And I'm often reminded of this by Michelle, Twee, Sally, and Elizabeth. The one big yes, starting a national movement, a worldwide movement for values, requires lots of little no's. I don't have time to watch TV 4 hours a day, or I don't have money to engage in shopping therapy. I have to take to heart Wednesday's promise, do the things I'm afraid to do, even if I don't want to do them, and I have to be willing to ask other people for help when I need it. So let's move on to part 5, visualization and realizing your dream, turning that vision into your reality. And I want to talk about 2 forms of visualization, process and outcome. And this is very important. Process visualization is visualizing yourself or someone else doing something. It is visualizing action, visualizing something being done. Process visualization is a verb. Every athlete engages in process visualization before running a race or swimming a race or going into the boxing ring. Every athlete sees the race. That's what Michael Phelps is doing here. He's visualizing himself. That's why he could swim the butterfly race in the Olympics with his goggles full of water. He had done it in his mind so many times that he knew right where he was. Confidence comes from being able to see yourself do something. There's a TED conference video by Amy Cuddy. She's a sociology professor on the incredible power of body language and just the way you carry yourself, shoulders back, head up, smile on your face, actually has a physiological impact on your brain. And just changing what goes on in your head, changing what you see, that mental theater will actually have a real world impact on what you get in your world outside. And then outcome visualization is the noun. It is the endpoint picture. And there is a strong interaction between the two of them. You know, Stephen Covey, one of his 7 habits is begin with the end in mind. And that's a great notion. But the truth is you can't do it. The people who started Google, as I just mentioned, they could never have seen where they end up. So all you can do is you can visualize something that you know is going to be one of many, many midpoints, the house. You start visualizing it, working on a blueprint, working through the budget. Say, well, it really doesn't want to be 2 stories. It really wants to be 1 story, but maybe with a basement. And that interaction between process visualization and outcome visualization does 2 things, at least. One is it helps make sure that your dream is more real. That's why if you've ever been involved with a construction project, say at a hospital or something, you go out in the parking lot with a roll of masking tape and you lay out on the ground with masking tape the layout of the room. And then you bring out beds and chairs and crash carts and all the furniture and all the equipment and move it around to make sure. That is process visualization in action. Move everything around to make sure the room works before you finalize the blueprint, which is the outcome visualization. So I want to wrap up with some practical strategies. And one, I think of it as these 6 letters, TBSSSN. Think big, TB, think big. Having a big dream often costs no more and often has no more risk than having a little dream. If you want to start a business, you can start a hot dog stand on the corner or have a dream of starting the McDonald's of hot dogs. You can only mortgage your house once. You can only lose your house once. The risk is really the same. The bigger the dream, it does not necessarily mean that you're going to have to work that much harder. You know, Ray Kroc, who started the McDonald's chain, he didn't work 9 million times harder than the guy who owns the local McDonald's franchise. He had a bigger dream. He was more focused. He was more deliberate in his action. He had perhaps a higher level of self-confidence. But thinking big has disproportionate leverage in helping you move toward your goal and in inspiring you and other people. But start small. Start with something. Start small. You know, build that first hot dog stand before you try to go to the bank and talk them into the financing for 100 of them. More and more people who write about entrepreneurship are saying, and especially with the internet today and the technology we have, it is very easy to start small and to start now. And that is the most important thing. So many dreams die because the dreamer keeps planning and planning and planning, and you get analysis paralysis. And sometimes you need to have a ready, fire, aim attitude where you pull the trigger and see where it starts going and then make adjustments. But you got to stop procrastinating. My favorite definition of procrastination has to do with time, and it is putting off today into tomorrow with the result that you're always living with the undone chores, living under the shadow of yesterday. The late Zig Ziglar, you know, a motivational speaker who recently passed away, used to give people a round button or a round coin with the letters TUIT on it. And he'd say, you've always been saying that someday you're going to get round to it. And he said, now you got a round to it. What's your next excuse? get started. And here is the most powerful thing I know to get you to stop procrastinating, to get you to think big, but start small and start now. And that is simply creating a prototype. These two guys are creating a prototype, a model of a motorcycle. They do that long before they ever run the first one off the factory line. One of my favorite prototype stories, Lee Iacocca, a sort of type A leader, when he was trying to turn around the Chrysler Corporation, which they did largely by using many of the strategies that we've talked about in this program, visualizing the minivan instead of declaring bankruptcy or going through lots of layoffs, for example. But he called in all of his engineers and he said, we don't have a convertible in our lineup. I need a convertible. Get me a prototype. They came back the next day and said, okay, here's the plan. It'll take us 6 months to create a prototype, and it'll cost this much money. And Iacocca, not a man known for being patient, banged his fist on the desk, cursed, and said, you still don't understand me, do you? Go down into the parking lot with a hacksaw, cut the top off a car, and call me when it's ready to take me for a ride. And that prototyping can create a personal sense of urgency to help you move toward your dreams so you don't fall into the swamp of paralysis and procrastination. And there is nothing that you can think of, no big dream, that you can't find a way to start with a small prototype. You want to write a book? Create an outline. Write a chapter. Write an article for a publication. Write a letter to the editor. Anything that you can do. Start writing in a journal so that someday you have lots of raw material. Start writing query letters to agents. Hey, I got this great idea for a book. What do you think? Would you represent it? Those are all prototypes, ways to get you started on moving toward your book. You want to start a business, but you don't think you have very good sales skills. Sign up for a network marketing company. Join Mary Kay. Especially if you're a guy, this will certainly give you a lot more courage. They will teach you a lot of things about yourself, about how to effectively sell to other people. And what Mary Kay used to say is, don't sell, just make people feel important and they'll want to buy from you. Today, in today's world, when you can go on Elance, which is a website for freelancers, I wanted to do an app. I want to do an app for the Self-Empowerment Pledge. And I went on Elance and I posted my 2-paragraph request for proposals. Within 24 hours, I had more than 30 proposals from all over the world within a very tight budget range, which I had specified. And that's a prototype. An RFP is a prototype. Now, we're not sure whether or how or with who we're going to move ahead, but that enabled me to take that first step instead of agonizing over, well, who would do it? I sat down, I wrote up an RFP, I put it in Elance and hit the send button. It took me less than an hour to get that prototype. Think about what your dream is, what your goal is, and think about what is a prototype that I can start. I can do something right now to get my momentum moving toward the achievement of that dream. And finally, I want to commend to you, in addition to the 360-day journal that you all have, and we are going to be sending out a Word document, I want to commend to you the exercise of writing your own horoscope. Why would you trust this woman? Why would you trust anyone writing in a newspaper with something as important of as your horoscope for the day? And so I do every day, either in the morning or the night before, and I scribble in my journal my horoscope. And very often it's the same sorts of things. You're going to have a great day. You're going to have an opportunity to touch a lot of people. There's going to be a new business opportunity coming to you today from out of the blue. 3 of my favorite words, out of the blue. But it will be carefully disguised. It will not be totally obvious what it is. So pay attention, everybody you talk to. So every time I get on a plane, I make a point of talking to the people around me because they just might be that from out of the blue person. And if I've written my horoscope, what I want to have happen that day, what I find is it's much more likely to happen. I'm much more likely to meet the people who can help me make it happen. Core action value number 8 in our course is vision. And I really believe you can, if you dream a big dream and make it a memory of the future, but then expect a miracle. Not a magic trick, but expect a miracle. I have another sign that I have in my home office. Every great accomplishment at one time was the impossible dream of somebody who did not quit when it got tough. So dream a big dream. Make it a memory of the future and expect a miracle. But don't give the universe a deadline. You know, the mini miracle that Sally and I wanted was to live in our dream home. And we thought maybe 2 years. It was almost 20 years. But we never gave up on the dream. We always knew that someday we're going to build out in that back corner of our lot. Candace Leitner, when she was at our conference, I asked her about those early tough years of starting MAD, and she said it took 2 years before I ever heard the word yes. Can I count on you for a vote? No. Will you make a donation? No. Will you volunteer for MAD? No. For 2 years, she lived on a diet of no. And if she had given the universe a deadline, we'd still have a drinking age of 18 and drunk driving deaths would still be off the charts. She had the courage to keep going on, to not give the universe, to not give God a deadline for the miracle that she wanted. We are fast approaching the end of 2012, and it is frightening to me because it seems like the end of 2011 was only days ago, not almost 12 months ago. You have a little over 2 weeks now to start thinking about 2013. And 2013 gives you a clean slate for next year. And so I really encourage you in the next 2 weeks, read the book, Your Dreams Are Too Small, and think about how those things apply to you. Make yourself, as the car salesman in that book did, make yourself your own motivational tape. The world's best motivational speaker is you talking to you. And so take the advice that Terry gives in the book and do something like that for yourself. Take to heart the Self-Empowerment Pledge. Go through the Spark a Dream workbook so that 2013 can be, as it's going to be for us at Values Coach, our memory of the future, so that 2013 can be your best year yet. Now let me wrap up with this. If you thought that this webinar was helpful, or if you were on our Never Fear, Never Quit webinar and this last time, I really would encourage you to take a look at and sign up for one or both of the webinar bundles that we have for next year. One is focused on you personally, and the other is focused on your organization. And we've sent you the slides for this, or we'll send you the links. But you can do the QR code there or click on the webinar bundle website. First bundle is these 4 webinars focused on personal strategies, how to not be your own worst enemy, how to have more energy. Energy's life. You got a lot of energy, you got a lot of life. If you don't, you don't. How to stay on top even when your world turns upside down. And probably the most important one, how to re-script negative self-talk with the janitor in your attic. And as we always do, every one of these will have a complimentary ebook, workbook, audio program, other resources. The second bundle has to do with your organization. And I'll do 4 webinars on leadership, on cultural transformation. One, the most important thing I think organizations can do, and almost none do, is create a cultural blueprint for the invisible architecture of their organization. And I'll do a webinar on that. I'll do one on how do you build a culture of ownership. If you've seen Sparkplug newsletter over the last couple days, I've done a series on the Pickle Challenge, which is the single most powerful tool I know of to change your attitude and to turn around morale within a workplace. And finally, I'll do one on the 4 dimensions of values-based leadership. And I'll probably, in that one, also cover some of the greatest leaders who never lived, leaders from fiction from whom we can learn an awful lot of lessons. So the next one is coming up on January 16th. It's on winning the war with yourself, and everybody who joins that will get the Winning the War with Yourself field manual. Plus, it's better to be a 3-legged coyote than a 4-legged fur coat, on how to escape the traps that we all occasionally find ourselves falling into. So let's wrap up. Let me wish you a very wonderful Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and best wishes for you to achieve your goals, your dreams, and for you to make 2013 your best year yet. Thank you very much for joining me. And the 7 favorite words that I often close with, I love to close with: never fear, never quit, and expect a miracle. I'll look forward to seeing y'all soon.